am not having good luck, you guys. Last time it was because I forgot to plug in my microphone. This time I actually recorded this one already also, but it glitched somehow and it didn't give me a notification that it did that. So it wasn't until I went to go check it and it said invalid video source and the video could not be found. So now I have to re-record this one again. Hopefully next week will be a little bit better. We will see. So, take number 2. Today we're going to talk about verbs. Are you ready? As I mentioned last time, we are going to diverge from the book a little bit, starting from this point, because we are almost done with book number 1. We have 3 lessons left, counting this one. So this one, and there's another one, and then one more, and we're all done with this book. So in book 2, I want to start working on kanji. By the time we finish with the next book, I want you to be able to pass at least the first level of the JLPT. In order to do that, we have to learn kanji. So we're going to quickly, very quickly, do the katakana. We're going to do half of them today. We'll do the other half next time. And in the final lesson, we'll practice a little bit with them. But now that you have some practice with the hiragana, learning the katakana should be very easy. A lot of them look very, very similar. The techniques that we used to practice the hiragana, you can use those same techniques with the katakana. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce the first half of them today. I want you to study them on your own. That's your homework today. So there's no homework vocabulary. Your homework is to study the first half of the katakana, just so that we can get through them really quickly and start doing kanji, okay? First up, we have the vowels. We have the hiragana on the left and the katakana on the right. The first thing you will probably notice is that the hiragana is very bubbly, very curvy, but the katakana is very sharp. Everything has a sharp edge, right? Very boxy. Katakana is very boxy. So we have a, I, U, E, and O. I'll sit here for a second in case you want to take a picture. Then we're going to do the K's, the S's, the T's, and the N's. Again, take a picture of this, study it, make some flashcards if you need to, or practice writing them, whatever helps you to study it. There are also a ton of apps that you can use to study them very quickly. It shouldn't take you but a couple of days to have these mastered, really, especially once you've already learned the hiragana. They are not as scary as they look, I promise. I mean, just look at ka, for example. It's almost exactly the same. This is the hiragana ka. Right, it's a little bit curvy and it has an arm. And then this is the katakana ka. It's a little bit more boxy. It's really hard to write with the mouse. Forgive me. Let me make that a little longer. And it's missing an arm. But other than that, they pretty much look the same. Same thing with ki. Ki looks very, very similar. Ku is a little bit different, but also similar. It still looks like a bird's mouth. Ke is a little different. Ko looks very similar. And you'll find that with a lot of them. A lot of them are very similar. Now, some of them are different. Some of them are more difficult than others. But just use the same techniques that we used. You know, draw a picture with them. Memorize has pictures that other people have drawn that you can use to kind of compare. Drops is another good one for studying the katakana. But it's not that bad. You can do it. I promise. So, we have the K's, the S's, the T's, and the N's. Take a picture really quickly, and we're going to go ahead and move on. Before we get started on verbs, I do want to quickly look at these 4 characters. This one here is not part of the list on that last page, but I went ahead and included it because it's part of this set. These 4 characters are probably the most difficult of all of the kana, honestly. Even of the hiragana, these 4 are the most difficult. So if you can master these 4, you are golden. pony boy. The easiest way to master these 4 characters is to think about their hiragana counterparts, namely the characters shi and su. So, just like shi goes up and down, the katakana shi also goes up and down. The character tsu, just like the hiragana tsu, goes left and right. The katakana tsu goes left and right. It's horizontal. Then for n and so, you just have to remember that n has only one. It's exactly the same as shi, but it's missing one of the lines. So is the same as tsu, but it's missing one of the lines. The way that I remember it is actually because so looks a little bit like the letter Y. If I were to continue this line down, I would get the letter Y. So then I think of Batman and the Joker. Why so serious? Why so serious? And that helps me to remember that this one looks like the letter Y, while N does not. So why so serious will help you remember the one that has the single stroke. These 4 are a little bit tricky, but you will get used to it, I promise. Just study it, use some flashcards, practice writing it a little bit. You'll have it mastered before you know it. Okay, we do have some new phrases. The first one is ohisashiburi. Ohisashiburi desu. This is a phrase just by itself, but to kind of help you remember it, that hisa here usually is written as a kanji character, and that kanji means long time. So this phrase means it has been a long time. That's just what it means. Pretty straightforward. Then this next phrase is actually very similar to a different phrase you had, I think, in lesson 3. Before, the phrase was eigo ga hanasemasu ka, meaning can you speak English? This time it's nanigo ga hanasemasu ka. So what do you think nanigo? If eigo means English and nihongo means Japanese, chugokugo means Chinese, what do you think nanigo means? What languages? And then hanasemasu means can speak. So what languages can you speak? Nanigo ga hanasemasu ka? What languages can you speak? Okay, now for the fun part. We are finally going to talk about verbs. There are 4 types of verbs in Japanese. First, we have regular verbs. Most resources are going to call these u verbs. They're not going to call them regular verbs. They're u verbs. We have irregular verbs, and there are only 2 of those. There's just 2, which is awesome because English has so many. We have so many irregular verbs, but Japanese has only 2. They are kuru and suru. We will talk about both of those later. Today, we're only going to do regular verbs, but I wanted to kind of give you a map of where we're going so that you have an idea and you know what to look forward to. So today, we're only doing regular verbs, but there are 2 irregular verbs, kuru and suru. Then we have iru eru verbs, which most textbooks are going to call ru verbs. And then we have iru eru exception verbs. There are only about 30-ish of those in total, not very many. So much, much better than some other languages. Verbs in Japanese are a lot easier than other languages. Now, before we get started with how to conjugate verbs, I want to talk about the names that I used on the last page. We are going to very affectionately call this the Trombley Nomenclature. Many regular verbs end with ru. Using the standard definition, the standard nomenclature that is used in the vast majority of textbooks. If you are a new student you would look at a word like wakaru, and you might think that it is a ru verb. It ends with ru, right? So you might conjugate this incorrectly because you think it's a ru verb. However, if instead you use the Trombley Nomenclature, that is the phrasing that was created by George and his lovely wife in this book right here, Japanese from Zero. It is much easier to distinguish between u verbs and ru verbs. Because George calls them iru eru verbs instead of ru verbs, we can look at the word wakaru. We can see, okay, wakaru does not rhyme with iru or eru. Therefore, it must be a regular verb. If you are confused right now, that's okay. It will all start to make a lot more sense once we start getting into the iru eru verbs. For now, we are going to focus on the regular verbs. In Japanese, every single verb in its dictionary form is going to end with a character from the u column. Right? It could be u, ku, gu, su, tsu, nu, bu, mu, or ru. All of them, every single one of them, no matter what it is. Every single one is going to end with one of these characters. You might notice that there are 4 u characters that are missing. They are zu, fu, pu, and yu. That is because there are no verbs at all that end with one of those characters. So there was no need to list them. In fact, there is only one that ends with nu. And it is shinu, which means to die. It's the only one. But to conjugate a regular verb, all we're going to do is take that final u character and change it to its e form. So we're going to go down a column or over a row, depending on what kind of chart you're looking at. Some of them are vertical, some of them are horizontal. But you're going to go from the u column to the e column. So for example, if the last character was u, you're going to move to the e. If the last character is ku, you'll change it to ki, so on and so forth. So let's look at this first verb. We have asobu. Asobu means to play. If I want to change it to I play or he plays, they play, whatever, I'm going to change it. I'm going to go to the bu, change it to be, asobi, and I'm going to add my verb ending. For today, we're just going to do the polite verb ending. So that's mas, that's the present tense. So I play would be asobimasu. Asobimasu. This one, oku, that means to put, right? To put. If I want to say I put or they put, we're going to change that to oki, right? We go from ku to ki, oki, and then mashita makes it past tense. Okimashita. I put the apple on the table this morning, right? Past tense. Then we have dasu, which means to take. This one's a little bit more tricky because we don't have si, right? It's su to shi. So da shi masen deshita. Dashimasen deshita. I didn't take. This one's past tense and also negative. This is just to practice conjugating the verbs. We will get to the meanings of the verb endings in just a second. So now that you have a general idea of how to conjugate, let's talk about the meanings of these verb endings. So we have the word kiku, which means to listen. If I want to conjugate kiku, what's the first thing I do? I need to change ku to ki. Ku changes to ki. Then I can add my verb ending. The first verb ending is mas. Mas is used for both the present tense and the future tense. Japanese does not have a future tense. They use time words like tomorrow, next week, that kind of thing, to indicate something will take place in the future. So that means kikimasu can mean I do listen or I will listen. Now I want to point out that in English, we usually would not include the word do. we would just say, I listen. The reason I put the word do here is because that is what mas means. Mas means do. The way that English does verbs is very, very different from the way that Japanese does verbs. Japanese is much, much easier. Just understanding that mas means do is going to help prevent confusion as we get into more complicated sentences later. But generally, when we would translate this, we would not say, I do listen. We would take out the do and just say, I listen. The present negative tense is masen. So, kikimasen would mean I don't listen. Or, I will not listen. Then we have the past tense, mashita. So, kikimashita would be I did listen. Of course, in English, we would usually not include the word did. Instead, we would have to change the word listen to listened, right? But this just makes it a little bit easier to understand. I did, past tense, listen. I did listen. If you want to say I did not listen, right? Past tense and negative. This one's a little bit more complicated. This time we have kikimasen and we add deshita. So kikimasen deshita. That's I did not listen. Let's try practicing with oyogu, which means to swim. So we have a dog here. He is soaking wet, so he has clearly already been in the water. How can I say it swam? Right? It did swim. It swam. How can I say that in Japanese? What is the first thing that I need to do? Take oyogu and change it to oyogi. Right? Oyogi. And it's past tense, so oyogimashita. It swam. Past tense. This dog is at the pool, but it does not look like it wants to swim. It has not been in the pool yet. We don't know if it's going to get in the pool. We just know it's not swimming at this moment. So how can we say it does not swim? Right now, at this moment, it does not swim. Oyogi masen. Oyogi masen. It doesn't swim. Now we have some guinea pigs. They are jumping into a pool. They're going to race. They have not touched the water yet. So this one's future tense. We know they're going to swim, but they're not swimming just yet. But remember, Japanese doesn't have a future tense. So how do I say they will swim? They will swim. Oyogi mas. Oyogi mas. With English verbs, you have to think about pronouns. You know, is it first person, second person? That's going to change the way the verb is conjugated. Is it past tense, future tense? And that's going to change the way the verb is conjugated. Past tense in English is insanely difficult. We have so many irregular verbs. Verbs that change spellings in the past tense. Verbs that get ed in the past tense. Verbs that don't change at all in the past tense. English verbs are a nightmare. Japanese is so much easier when it comes to verbs. That is the one thing that the Japanese did right, is verbs. Their verbs are so much easier than ours are. Way easier. So, they will swim. We don't have to worry about what pronouns being used. Doesn't matter. The verb is the same. So, they will swim. This dog is not at the pool. This dog is in Rome. He's at the Roman fountain. You cannot swim in the Roman fountain. So, did this dog swim? No, it did not. Past tense, negative. How can we say that? It did not swim. Oyogimasen deshita. Right, that's the long one. Oyogimasen deshita. It didn't swim. And we are all done for today. We are going to do the second half of the katakana next time. And we are just about done with this book. So study the katakana and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.